When I first started, I made a movie before this called Capital Punishment, which we released in 2021. And when we started that movie, I didn't believe it. I thought the idea that the government would be targeting these people was a little bit crazy. And the more I've gotten into it, I realized that that is the hardest thing to get people to consider. You have to be open to the fact that your government would do this. And if you look back through history, they've done it before. They've lied to you before. What makes you think all of a sudden the government won't lie to you? They've been lying to us for decades.
Welcome to the Michele Tafoya podcast.
Nick Searcy is an actor you've probably seen in a lot of films, a lot of television series. Just Google him. But you probably know who he is. But this film, The War on Truth, is one that he made. And it is remarkable. I have been sort of agnostic on January 6th. I think some people have made too much of it. I think some people haven't made enough of it. So I finally sat down and watched this film, The War on Truth, which has some perspectives on January 6th you might not have ever heard about because they haven't been out there. And you can say, well, if they haven't been out there already, it's because they're not important or they didn't matter. I dare you to open up your mind and watch this film, The War on Truth, and ask yourself if you had a friend who showed up at the Capitol, put out their iPhone to record what was going on that day, maybe got shoved in through a door and was sentenced to 8 months in prison for a misdemeanor. You might start to ask yourself, is this right? And that's just the tip of the iceberg in this film. I learned about people dying that day that no one ever talks about. Not just Ashley Babbitt. This is incredible. I encourage you to watch. And Nick Searcy is our guest. So Nick, welcome. The first thing I started to think about after watching your film was, how does a guy whose career is in film, in entertainment, in television, in Hollywood, put himself on the line this way? Because I don't think that your viewpoint on January 6th probably aligns with most of the people in Hollywood. What kind of risk was this for you?
I wouldn't say that it aligns with Hollywood at all. Well, in some ways it was a risk, but in other ways, I mean, I've always been at risk. I mean, in 2018, I directed a fairly controversial movie called Gosnell, which was about the abortion doctor in Philadelphia that was convicted of murder. So I kind of have not been, quiet about what I thought for a long time. Although January 6th is it's about as hot button an issue as you can get, I suppose. So.
And maybe that's why I've sort of avoided it, because it seems to me that the people who believe January 6th was an insurrection and like the biggest crime that we've ever seen in America seem a little extreme to me. And then the people who completely write it off seem like, well, maybe you're ignoring some things. And I kind of have sat here in the middle. So as a person sitting in the middle, one of the things that jumped out about your film was the way that these targets, these people who maybe were at the Capitol, maybe videotaped, maybe, recorded, whatever, the way that they were approached by the DOJ and targeted in their homes. One particular scene of a wife holding her 4-year-old son out in the cold while her husband is thrown down into the snow was particularly hard for me to watch. And it's real video. Why do you think that these people were treated like mass murderers?
Well, this is what really set me on the path that I'm on, because I was there on January 6th. I went there with a friend and we didn't, I didn't see any violence. I didn't see anything. I guess I was on the wrong side of the building. But when I got home that night and I looked at the television, it was nothing like what I'd seen. I'd seen a lot of people, being peaceful, singing songs and waving flags. And then when I started hearing about how people were being approached, these people that, basically a lot of the people that have been targeted and arrested for January 6th are people that have never been arrested for anything before in their lives. They're not career criminals. And yet that's how they're being treated by the FBI. They get a 6 a.m. SWAT team, a swarm of vehicles, all this overkill. And so that's what sort of really set me on the path. I want to find out who these people are. Why are they being treated this way? And I think you'll see in the movie, the conclusion I've come to is that the government is perpetrating a lie. And in order to perpetrate that lie, they have to pretend like these people are dangerous, awful, terrorist people who want to destroy the country. And that's simply not the case. And that's your first clue that if they're treating people like this and there's no reason for it, then what is it they really are trying to cover up?
So in one case, a man was found guilty of a misdemeanor, and the misdemeanor got him 8 months in prison. I think that's right.
Yeah.
Since when does a misdemeanor get you 8 months in prison?
Well, never. I mean, it's never been done before. I mean, that's, Louis Gohmert, who's in our movie, he was a judge in Texas, and we asked him that exact question. How many times have you sent somebody to prison for trespassing? And it's never been done. But what they're doing to these people too, I mean, another thing we go into is the plea deal situation. They take these middle-class people who are not career criminals, so they don't really know how to navigate the judicial system anyway. They're not used to it. And they pile up all these charges on them and say, if you go to trial, you're going to lose, which is true, because in the District of Columbia, a Trump supporter has no chance in a jury trial, none. And so they pile up these charges and they force them to take a plea deal. And then the government prances around and goes, see, another domestic terrorist has pled guilty. And basically the only reason they did it was to keep from being bled dry by the judicial process.
Because if you put enough pressure on people and you make them spend their life savings on lawyers, eventually they're going to cave.
Exactly. And that's the strategy. And that is to perpetuate this narrative that the government has that, January 6th was worse than Hiroshima and the Civil War and 9/11 all put together. They have to keep that going.
Some of the footage in your film I had not seen before, and like I said, I've sort of stayed away from this topic for a variety of reasons, personal and otherwise. But in some of this footage, I was really surprised that it could be ignored, and some of the witnesses were completely ignored. In the case of the Ashley Babbitt murder, let's call it what it was. She was with a guy named Taylor Hanson, who called himself an independent journalist. He claims in the film that he offered his footage and his testimony. He had hours of footage. He stood right with Ashley Babbitt as she died. This, of course, is the woman who was in the armed services, and she was shot through a window. When I saw that footage of the gun and just this random shot through a window, I thought, what in the hell just happened? What provoked that? And why hasn't Taylor Hanson, who was right there with her, been interviewed? This is astonishing to me, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but this is astonishing to me. What was your conclusion about him?
Well, you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to have common sense. And the fact is that the January 6th committee, with all their investigation, they never mentioned Ashley Babbitt. They never mentioned Roseanne Boylan. They didn't mention any of the people who died. And so they weren't interested. I mean, and that's the most shocking thing. That's the hardest thing to get your head around, I believe, especially if you're, like you say, you're not somebody who is really steeped in this issue or you paid a lot of attention to it. You don't want to believe that your government is this way. But it is. I mean, the January 6th committee did not call one witness to testify as to why Ashley Babbitt was shot. And Taylor Hanson had all the footage. He was right there and was begging to be let to tell the story. And that's the conclusion that I drew. And I think the conclusion that a lot of people will draw if they see the movie is that the government is not interested in what happened because they want to advance a narrative that does not include that information. They don't want to have to deal with that when they are talking about the insurrection of January 6th.
Let's talk about this other death that I am ashamed to admit I knew nothing about until I saw your film. Okay, I talk about free speech a lot, and why? Because it's at the heart of our very democracy. You got to be able to talk, and you shouldn't be compelled to say things you don't want to say. Free speech is the cornerstone that is behind every freedom we hold dear. But in this digital age we're living in, discussions about our wealth, our rights, and our future they're kind of being overshadowed, even silenced in mainstream narratives. And that leaves a lot of you feeling like you don't have a voice in the conversation that is crucial to your financial independence and security. And this is where wealth protection research steps in. They are armed with a mission that's never been more important. Wealth protection research isn't a financial advisory firm. They're defenders of free speech. They're committed to giving a voice to people who have been silenced. Wealth protection research tirelessly seeks out financial experts, and these are the voices that challenge the prevailing narratives, especially as we steer toward the uncertainties of the 2024 election. Wealth Protection Research has created a 2024 Election Wealth Protection Report. It is a free report. It highlights the 3 best ideas for protecting and growing your money as you head into the 2024 election. It contains ideas that the mainstream media won't touch, and you can get it completely free. Just text the word IDEAS, IDEAS, to 76626 to claim your free copy. If you believe in the sanctity of free speech, as I do, and the importance of financial freedom, well, act now. Text IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy of this 2024 Election Protection Report. It's time to widen the scope of what we're told and to hear the ideas the establishment doesn't think you can handle. You know you can handle it. And take control of our financial destinies. Text IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy right now. Let's talk about this other death that I am ashamed to admit I knew nothing about until I saw your film. And this was Roseanne. They tried to write it off as, well, she OD'd on amphetamines. What did the coroner ultimately find? What happened to her? Let's just start with that basic idea. Now, I don't care if she's a QAnon enthusiast. I don't care if she voted for Trump. She was a human being there that day who died right then and there. And yet I didn't hear about this until I saw your film. So what happened there?
Well, there's no shame in you having not heard about it because the media has done a terrific job of hiding the facts about Roseanne Boylan. They first said, the lies of the media about Brian Sicknick, bludgeoned to death with a fire extinguisher, never happened. 5 police officers died that day. None of them, that's not true. None of that happened. And when they said Roseanne Boylan, died of a drug overdose, that's a total lie. The only drug that was in Roseanne Boylan's system was, I believe, Adderall. It's an ADD drug. There's no way you can even take enough of that. I mean, you'd have to really be trying to take enough Adderall to kill you. What happened to Roseanne Boylan is that she was caught in the crush of the people in the tunnel. There were a number of people pushing people into the tunnel. And, a lot of these were these kind of the agitators, as I call them, that have never been brought to trial, that have never been investigated. A lot of them are confidential informants. To me, they're operatives. They were pushing people into the tunnel. And on the other side, the police were pushing back. So there was a crush of people. Roseanne Boylan found herself, along with a man named Philip Anderson, who we interview in the movie, under a pile of people. And people were just being pushed on top of them and on top of them. And the police were pushing from the other side. And so when they finally got the people off of her and she was breathing and screaming for help, a police officer named Lila Morris began hitting her in the head with a baton. And Tommy Tatum, Philip Anderson, the people who were right there with her, said that they believed that baton strike is what killed Roseanne Boylan. And so this goes into, you want to talk about a conspiracy theory, but I look at all this stuff and I go, this to me proves that they were trying to have something happen that day that they could blame on Trump and Trump supporters. They were intentionally targeting women in the crowd so that the men in the crowd would react in a certain way because you're not going to, if you're a Christian man who's a veteran or a former police officer, and you see a woman being beaten with a baton for what seems to be like no reason, you're going to have a reaction. And so I think that's what happened that day. I think that was deliberate. I often think about when I interview these people, I often think about if I had been where they were, I probably would have done the same thing. And it would be me there in the gulag instead of them, because I think any decent man seeing something like that would have a reaction.
Well, I think any decent human, if I had been there and seen another woman being beat, I would have had that reaction. It was pretty stunning to me. And there were two other men who died that day. One of cardiac arrest. Were they both heart attack victims? It was surrounded by a flashbang, right?
Right. One kind of was not necessarily directly related to a flashbang. He died early in the day. But yes, I believe the man's name was Kevin Greason. He was hit with a flashbang, which went off and he dropped and, died of a heart attack.
So again,
and there's footage. There's also footage of these flashbangs being fired into the middle of the crowd for what seems to be like no reason at all, simply to stir up the crowd, simply to cause a ruckus. So that footage is inexplicable to me in any other way except that it was deliberate.
There are a number of angles there's a lot of footage in this film that I had never seen. And I wonder how much of what you show in this film was not part of the J6, produced by news producers, primetime presentation. How much of what you had was original and never really seen before?
Well, there's some of the footage that we did get from what was eventually released, but a lot of the footage is like, just individuals who were there that day, like me or anybody else who just had their iPhone and just filmed what was going on. I mean, as of course, some of this footage has been used by the government to prosecute these people. There's a friend of mine in the movie, Siaka Massaquoi, who's an actor friend, and he filmed everything that he did. He filmed with his iPhone, and some of this footage was used against him. And so a lot of the footage just came from individuals who were there who either could not get the government to look at their footage, like Taylor Hanson, or the footage was taken by the government and used against them in their trials.
I think what people are resistant to is this idea that the United States government, where everyone swears an oath to protect the Constitution, could possibly turn against its own citizens. And, that's been hard for me to get my head around. But in seeing the way that the Department of Justice operates and the fact that they kind of sidestepped all these questions about professional agitators being involved. They would say things like, to this date, we have seen no evidence of that. Or, in the case of Merrick Garland, I'm not sure how many there were. I'm not sure if there were any there. You're not sure? Yeah. You're not sure. And so I think people are going, look, these are Trump supporters. So by their very nature, we can't trust them. We can't believe them. They're all a bunch of whatevers. I mean, they're going to stereotype, right? About the people who were there that day. And I'm sitting here talking to you, a really reasonable, thoughtful human with a great career behind him, who was there and didn't see any of this, but in retrospect is going, whoa, whoa, whoa. The agitator notion, whether it was FBI informants, Antifa, whatever it was, people don't like to hear the word Antifa because they think it's made up and they think it's it's conspiracy theory. But it sure does look like a lot of the people there had, I don't know, walkie-talkies, helmets, stuff that not your average person at a protest would have.
Yes, it was very coordinated. And that it's easy to say for professional liars like Christopher Wray. It's easy to say we have seen no evidence. If you're not looking for it, you're not going to see it. And the fact is, I've seen evidence. I'm just some actor from Burbank. We have footage of people changing out of black clothing into Trump clothing in the bushes in front of the Capitol. We have John L. Sullivan, who was in the hallway when Ashley Babbitt was shot. He's admitted a known BLM supporter, Antifa guy. He's on camera bragging about, hey, we did it. We caused it. We made this happen. The idea that there's no evidence is just a lie. And you don't, that's blatant. And then that's when you start to think, what else are they lying about? What is this the whole fabric of the whole day is a lie. And what you just said is the biggest challenge in getting people to take a look at this stuff, because you really do not want to believe that your government would function this way. I didn't want to believe it. When I first started, I made a movie before this called Capital Punishment, which we released in 2021. And when we started that movie, I didn't believe it. I thought the idea that the government would be targeting these people was a little bit crazy. And the more I've gotten into it, I realized that is the hardest thing to get people to consider. You have to be open to the fact that your government would do this. And if you look back through history, they've done it before. They've lied to you before. What makes you think all of a sudden the government won't lie to you? They've been lying to us for decades.
Father's Day and graduation are coming up, and if you want to be the gift giver that really wows the recipient, go to besthotgrill.com and get the last grill you will ever need to buy. With all these special events coming up, besthotgrill.com recommends the gifts of grilling and healthy eating, and I recommend it as well. If you've got a dad or a grad you want to honor, or anyone else, do it with a gift that will be used, that will be unforgettable and truly hot. And that would be a Solaire infrared grill from besthotgrill.com. See, Solaire infrared grills heat up to 1,000 degrees in 3 minutes. That is not a joke or an exaggeration. I've done it on the balcony when it's like 10 degrees outside. These grills produce juicy, tasty food unmatched by conventional grills. I'm not exaggerating. Now, you might also be taken to the road. You might be having a staycation this summer. Solaire has hot and fast portable, built-in, and cart models to help you step up your grilling. All Solaire infrared grills are made in the USA. That's so cool. And they're built to last. And more importantly, Solaire infrared grills deliver that wow factor that everybody likes to receive in a gift or major purchase. Learn more about the amazing Solaire infrared grills at besthotgrill.com. The char flavor on a steak or a grilled piece of chicken on these, it's second to none. That is besthotgrill.com. Solaire infrared gift giving at besthotgrill.com.
When I said how many agents or assets of the government were present on January 5th and January 6th and agitating in the crowd to go into the Capitol and how many went into the Capitol, can you answer that now?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Oh, last time, you don't know how many there were or there were none?
I don't know the answer to either of those questions. If there were any, I don't know how many. I don't know whether there are any.
I think you may have just perjured yourself that you don't know that there were any.
You were in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. Now, this seems to be a litmus test for a lot of people. I remember being asked once before, just straight out, basically, are you an election denier? Do you believe the election was fair? Do you believe Biden won the election? It makes me laugh that people were within 24 hours saying this was the safest, fairest election, of all time. How can you possibly make that sweeping statement in 24 hours? This was the most fair, election ever. Come on. That's just kind of disingenuous. But why did you go to DC on the 6th?
Well, I didn't want to go at first, but I was headed back east anyway. I was living in California at the time. I was going to go back east to see my parents who live in North Carolina. And a friend of mine was going. He said, we should go. It's a day in history. It's going to be fun. Let's just be there. And I thought, well, all right, I'll stop by. So I just flew, that's really the attitude. I said, I want to see what happens. And so I just went and, January 5th, I flew in. January 6th, I just sort of walked around and saw the speech and, talked to people. And I talked to one reporter, that I can't remember what paper he was from, but he published an article saying what I said, which was like, and I kind of half jokingly said, I'm here because this might be the end of the Republic. And I wanted to see it, and, but he put it in the paper. And of course it looks like I'm a terrorist or something when I say that. But yeah, I just went to see what it was. And, like a lot of other people, we were there because we did not believe the election was the fairest in history. We thought something was wrong and they refused to verify it. And what people do not face or do not think about is the fact that the process that was going forward in the House and the Senate that day was exactly what we all went there to have happen. We wanted that to happen. Ted Cruz had stood up and said, we challenged the vote. Another one got up, another congressman verified it. Mike Pence verified it. They said, okay, they were in the process of sending the vote back to the states for 10 days to verify that it was the fairest election in all of human history. And that was exactly what we all wanted. Well, what happened? Capitol Police let everybody into the building. They declared some emergency. They shot Ashley Babbitt. And cleared the House and Senate. And then when they came back, they said, well, it's all too dangerous. We've got these terrorists outside now, and we have to stop this process and go ahead and certify the election today. And that's what they did. So the riot or whatever, the disturbance that happened at the Capitol did not benefit the people that were there protesting. The only people it benefited were Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats who wanted the election certified immediately. So that right there should give you some pause about what really happened that day.
Oh my goodness! In the process of making this film, what is your? I could see you in certain scenes very pained by what people were going through, because some people just said, "I'm not pleading out. I can't. Yeah. This doesn't feel right to me. I'm not going to sign some paper that says I did something that I didn't do." And they're sitting in jail, prison. What? Yeah. So what's your biggest takeaway from all of the interviews you did, all of the people that you spoke to, all of what you saw, including dropping someone off at prison?
Well, I had to cut a lot of the stuff where I was crying, because I was crying a lot. And it got a little bit old because these stories are so disturbing and so moving. I mean, it's like Annette Kuhn, losing her child after the day after the SWAT team raid. Colton McAbee trying to give Roseanne Boylan CPR to save her life. And, him refusing to plead guilty, and he gets sentenced to 8 years. I mean, the punishment for these people is so disproportionate, and the way these people are being tortured, it's impossible not to be moved by this. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. I don't care if you hate Trump or whatever. You cannot look at this film and think these people are being treated fairly. This is justice. And to me, that is the biggest takeaway. That's what I most wanted to do with the film, is really show you who these people are, show you what they're going through, and make people ask themselves, is this something I support? Do I believe that these people are being treated fairly?
Really the entire democracy is built around one thing. That's freedom of speech, the First Amendment. It's the cornerstone that supports every single freedom that we have and enjoy in this country. But here we are in a digital age, and discussions about our wealth, our rights, and our future are being silenced or overshadowed in mainstream narratives. And that leaves a lot of us feeling like we don't really have a voice in the conversations that are crucial to our independence, our financial independence, and our security. And this is where wealth protection research steps in. They are armed with a mission that's Honestly, it's never been more critical. Wealth Protection Research isn't a financial advisory firm. They're defenders of free speech. They're committed to giving a voice to the silenced. Wealth Protection Research tirelessly seeks out financial experts. Now, these are the voices that challenge the prevailing narratives out there, especially as we navigate the uncertainties of the 2024 election. Wealth Protection Research has created a 2024 Election Wealth Protection Report. This is a free report that highlights the 3 best ideas for protecting and growing your money heading into the 2024 election. It contains ideas the mainstream media won't touch, and you can get it completely free by texting IDEAS, IDEAS, to 76626 to claim your free copy. If you believe, as I do, in the sanctity of free speech and the importance of financial freedom, act now. Text IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy of this 2024 Election Protection Report. It's time to widen the scope of what we're told, to hear the ideas the establishment doesn't think you can handle, but you can, and take control of our financial destinies. Text IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy. Do it now. I guess the final thing I would ask you is, a lot of these people that we see in your film who seem to be agitating, who seem to be stoking problems, have any of them faced any kind of legal issues?
A few of them have, when it became impossible for the government to protect them any longer. Like Ray Epps, you'll see in the movie, he was finally charged with one misdemeanor after it just became obvious that you cannot not charge this guy after, he's outside screaming, go into the Capitol. And there's also footage of him in our movie where you see, strangely, him being removed from the crowd.
That is a really, let's point that out. That is a stark scene, and you run it a few times. So here's the guy that's getting everybody revved up to go inside the Capitol. And then something happens in this particular moment, and it almost seemed to be signaled, right? Was there an actual physical signal to get him out of there?
Well, what we see in the shot of the crowd, there's a wide shot of the crowd. You see where Ray Epps comes in after he's caused the first breach at the first barricade. It was him. He comes in with a big Trump flag. A smoke pop goes off on one side of the crowd, and immediately 8 guys, military style, come in and they march him out of the crowd. 4 in front of him, 4 in back. They clear a path and they get him out of there. And right after that is when the Capitol Police start firing munitions into the crowd. So that's something, okay? And
it wasn't that they weren't escorting him out to arrest him, correct?
No, he didn't get arrested. So if you're really looking for the truth about January 6th, you don't look at that. They'd use facial recognition software to arrest grandmas who were praying in the Capitol, but you don't look at that. You can't find the pipe bomber that you have on film by himself setting a pipe bomb, if it was really a pipe bomb out in front of the DNC. I mean, they just, and to your question about were there any consequences for these people, John L. Sullivan actually finally did get some prison. I think he got sentenced to prison. He's at least been convicted of something, but this was, years later. And, he was one of the obvious BLM people. And when they convicted him, they didn't say anything about that. They didn't, really trump up the fact or point up the fact that he was a career BLM supporter who happened to be in the hallway when Ashley Babbitt was killed. So I think a lot of these people too, Michele, they've been used. I mean, some of them, there's a guy who testifies in the movie that he was paid to protest and he's sorry about it. I mean, a lot of people did not necessarily know, these agitators, what exactly they were there to do. They were just set up.
And the person who pulled the trigger of the gun that killed Ashley Babbitt, what about that person?
Yeah. Michael Byrd, immediately he was like, oh, that was a clean shoot. He was totally justified. They cleared him right away. And you'll see in our movie that, many people have looked at that shoot and said, there's no way. He didn't follow the rules of engagement. He just pulled the trigger, on an unarmed person. He kept saying, I couldn't see her hands. And he didn't even know if it was a man or a woman. He just fired. And so it's a really dark situation. And the fact that it's been covered up is just another factor in the whole distrust of the government story about January 6th.
Nick, remind people how they can find your film.
You can find it on salemnow.com. That's a very popular site for kind of conservative leaning content. And it's also got its own website at thewarontruthmovie.com.
Thewarontruthmovie.com. So, folks, just because it's on a conservative website doesn't mean that you shouldn't watch it. I'm so glad, Nick, that you shot me an email and said, watch it before we talk. Please make sure you watch it. And I stayed up really late to watch it last night after my son's baseball game. And I'm truly glad that I did. There were moments in it where I honestly had to question a lot of things. And listen, I have a good friend who said to me one day, yeah, but 5 police officers were killed that day. That is not true. That is not true. And yet people, upstanding surgeons, have said this to be well-educated, smart Americans who care about the country believe that. And it's not true.
Well, it goes back to that thing. You don't want to believe that people are lying to you this blatantly, but they are. They say 5 police officers were killed that day. That's a lie. Joe Biden comes out every couple of weeks and says these are all white supremacist, racist terrorists, and white supremacy is the biggest threat this country faces. That's a lie. That's not true. I've read some statistics where it said 17 people were killed by white supremacists last year, and 18 people were killed by vending machines. So vending machines are actually a worse threat.
Those damn vending machines. I knew I didn't trust them.
Right. You get your hand caught in it, and that's
a death sentence.
But all of these lies compounded together, that is the toughest part of getting people to face the fact that their government could be lying to you, and because you just don't think they're going to come out and keep saying 5 police officers died that day for 3 years. When it's just a blatant lie, but that's what they've done.
It's simply not true. We have the date of deaths on all of those officers. 4 of the 5 were suicides, and they're trying to blame, again, the actual date. It's like they're trying to blame, insurrection. You see, it was so traumatic that these guys killed themselves. And you know what? That could be true. I don't know that we know exactly why 4 of these 5 officers killed themselves. But they didn't die.
Well, I'll say this.
Go ahead.
We reached out to the families of all of those people, all of those officers, to try to find out, if there was some reason that they killed themselves that was related to January 6th, and none of them would talk to us. None of them. And so I think there is a definite, the government can coerce people into cooperating. That's just a fact. And I think in many cases, they have contacted these families and said, don't talk about this. So,
freedom of speech also under assail. It's so great to meet you and to talk to you. And I'm truly glad I watched this film. And truly, I am. I couldn't stop thinking about it. And so I urge people to see it. And you don't have to shake your head along with everything. And you don't have to like Donald Trump. But what you need to do is to appreciate what happened and what it continues to happen to some of these people who are just regular folks, American patriots. Right. Nick, thank you so much. Well, go ahead.
Thank you, Michelle. I mean, I really appreciate you watching the film. I mean, it really makes such a difference that you were someone who maybe didn't have a very hard fixed opinion about this, and that you were open-minded enough to watch the film. I want that from
yes, absolutely. I would encourage anyone, just open your mind and watch it. Listen to some people and then make your own decision. But don't close your mind to some of these facts, Nick.
And then you can come to Twitter and argue with me and call me a name. Yeah.
I bet that's never happened before.
No.
So great to meet you. I really appreciate you. His film is courageous, and I think it's doing some good because it's made me think a lot. So Nick Searcy, thank you so much. I hope to see you again.
Thank you, Michelle. I'll come back, and I've got a book out now, so we can talk about that later.
Next time. Next time.
Okay.